Guys, what's going on? James here, and in today's video I wanted to talk about 5 players who I think are on the roster bubble for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they're either in a position where they could make the team or not make the team. They're right there on the edge. It could go either way. It's 50-50. We don't know. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so the first player that I want to talk about today is going to be Stevie Kalavati. Now, I made a 53-man roster predictions video talking about all of these players, and if you want to go check that out, it will be up in the top right of the screen with the eye icon and whatnot. But talking about Stevie Kalavati, again, it's just as likely, just as it is unlikely that he could make this roster. I think that he's come in, he's been able to slim down, cut his hair, really come in and improve on where he was last year. He's obviously last year he was on the injured reserve for the entire year. He didn't get any type of playing time. He's a former 7th round pick from Jason Light. And when he came in, he was a really big guy. I think he was the biggest defensive tackle that we had on the team. Now that we have Vita Vea, that is no longer the case, but I still feel that Stevie T has a lot to offer for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not just as a big run-stopping defensive tackle, but also a guy who can help create opportunities for other defensive tackles, maybe Gerald McCoy, and even some of the defensive ends. However, he is facing a struggling uphill battle because the Buccaneers like to move some defensive ends inside to defensive tackles. Guys like William Golston. I think they plan on doing it a little bit with Vinny Curry and Jason Pierre-Paul. So that really hampers him down a little bit, because if you have not only 4 defensive tackles, which we would assume would be Gerald McCoy, Vita Vea, Mitch Unrein, and Bo Allen, but you also have to take into the fact that the Buccaneers can use some of their defensive ends at defensive tackle as well, and that really hampers Stevie T and really makes it harder for him to make this team. However, I do think he will make this team, all things considered, just because he's shown a lot of improvement this year. I know a lot of other Bucs content creators are very impressed with what he's been able to do, and I tend to agree. I've watched a lot of the one-on-ones when going to training camp and whatnot, and he's definitely improved in that aspect. So I really like what Stevie T brings to the table, and I think he does have a very good chance of making this roster, and me personally, I think he will make this roster. But moving on to player number 2, it's Riley Bullough. Now, I'm not 100% sure if Riley Bullough can remain on the practice squad if he doesn't make this roster. I'm going to assume that he can, for the purposes of this video and whatnot. But honestly, I don't know if he would stay on our practice squad, guys. I think he could easily get signed to another team, cough, cough, the New England Patriots, because I think every Bucs player who leaves will go to the New England Patriots. But the point is that I think that if the Buccaneers were to cut Riley Bullough and try and stash him on the practice squad and whatnot, I don't think he would stay there. I think he would get signed away because of what he provides to certain teams. He provides leadership, he provides toughness, and he provides good run-stopping ability. Now, I know I just said a lot of positives about Riley Bullough, and your next question is probably, well, then why don't you think he's going to be making the roster? The reason I don't think he's going to be making the roster is because of the quality of depth that we already have at the position. Let's take a look at the first guy, Adarius Glanton, okay? Adarius Glanton, for me, is the best backup linebacker we have on the team right now, okay? He even is rumored, he even has the ability to push Kendall Beckwith for a starting linebacker spot at the left outside linebacker position. That's how good Adarius Glanton / Taylor, I'll call him Adarius Taylor, that's how good Adarius Taylor is for this team. Not only is he good at linebacker and he's all around the ball whenever he gets playing time, but he also is a phenomenal special teams player, which the Buccaneers value good special teams players a lot. So it makes a lot of sense that Adarius Taylor would be the top-rated backup linebacker for this team. The other guy that I really think will push Riley Bullough for a roster spot and eventually beat him out would be Jack Sitchie. I've talked a lot about how much potential Jack Sitchie has ever since we drafted him. I think when he was first drafted, I talked about how this guy was supposed to be a 3rd-round draft pick if he stayed healthy. He hadn't played football in a couple of years due to some ACL injuries, but when fully healthy, he was supposed to be a 3rd-round draft pick. That, to me, is huge. That, to me, shows that Jack Sitchie is just oozing potential, and that he will have this ability to be a very versatile linebacker. He can play middle linebacker, left outside linebacker, right outside linebacker, and Riley Bullough has that ability as well. But I think that Jack Sitchie has more raw talent, I guess, in a way. Don't get me wrong, I love Riley Bullough. I love him, and I hope he does make this roster. I hope all these guys, well, most of these guys can make the roster, and if not the roster, somehow land on our practice squad. But I think that Jack Sitchie just has more raw ability, and I think that Adarius Taylor has just shown more in terms of his overall playing ability. Really, Riley Bullough is one of the closest calls for me in terms of people who can make this roster. I'll be talking about a player later, and honestly, if this guy doesn't make the roster, the player I'm going to be talking about later, then I could see Riley Bullough making this roster easily and have the Bucs carry 6 linebackers. But moving on to the third player that I wanted to talk about, it's Freddie Martino. Now, you know, I feel bad for Freddie Martino. I do. I think Freddie Martino could easily make this roster. If Bobo Wilson and Justin Watson weren't doing just as good as him. I think that, I wish all 3 of them could make the roster. Unfortunately, the Buccaneers have such a deep wide receiver core at this point. You have Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin, Adam Humphries. After that, yes, it's a toss-up, but you have just freshly drafted 5th-round draft pick Justin Watson. You can assume he's going to make the roster because they drafted him. They obviously want to keep him. And then you have Bobo Wilson, who there's been so much hype coming around Bobo Wilson, Jameis Winston. I've talked about Bobo Wilson in his offseason and whatnot. But so many people in the Bucs organization, from Jameis to Dirk Cutter, all these people were praising Bobo Wilson and saying he's had one of the best offseasons so far for the team. And that really sucks for Freddie Martino. I like Freddie Martino a lot. I think he could be a very productive wide receiver for this team, but I just don't think there's enough room for him. I really, if the Buccaneers were to carry 7 wide receivers, yeah, I think he could make this roster. I also like Bernard Reedy as well, but Martino, he's played in regular season games before, as is Bobo Wilson at this point. But, Martino has been able to show that he's a very good deep threat. He can run routes well. He has very good hands. It's just really unfortunate that we're just so deep at the wide receiver position that there just might not be enough room for him. He might get shoved out just to the fact that our depth is so good. So that's unfortunate. But moving on to the 4th guy that I want to talk about, it's Charles Sims. Okay, Charles Sims is the guy that I was talking about a few seconds ago, where if Charles Sims doesn't make this roster, then Riley Bullough would probably take his roster spot. And that's only if the Buccaneers decide to carry 3 running backs, which I don't think they will. I think they'll carry 4 running backs, and I think that Charles Sims will make this roster. The reason I think that he will make this roster is, 1, he's a former Jason Light draft pick. They love him. He obviously left for free agency this past offseason, didn't get any offers from any teams, and now he has since signed back with the Buccaneers like the day of the draft or something like that, or right before the draft. So he's back. What does Charles Sims offer to this team? Well, he is by far the best receiving running back that the Buccaneers have on this team, bar none. You could argue that Peyton Barber's improved a lot as a receiving back, and I assume Jaquiz Rodgers is no slouch as well. But I think that, you can do a lot more with Charles Sims than just having him swing out as a running back. You can play him in the slot if you need to. You can move him around in the formation. I know a lot of people don't like Charles Sims, and I'm not the biggest fan of Charles Sims as well, but at the end of the day, I know that the general manager is probably Jason Light loves Charles Sims, I assume, because he drafted him and then he brought him back. I assume that offer had been on the table for a while for bringing Charles Sims back. He wanted to wait, and then he eventually came back with the team. I don't specifically know how Dirk Cutter and company feel about him. I assume they like him, considering they were also part of the draft process and bringing him in. And I'm sure they like having that extra receiving option for the team. The only way I would see that Charles Sims doesn't make this roster is if Peyton Barber has really shown that he's improved as a receiving back, which I think he has. Maybe is it enough to push Charles Sims, though, for his 3rd down back receiving back job? I don't know. And also, I think the Buccaneers, as you'd have to wait on improvement from Ronald Jones as well as a receiving back. From what I've seen so far, he's not there yet. I think he can get there, but he's not there yet. So you kind of have Charles Sims there as that safety blanket and that check down option for your quarterback, which makes him valuable to the team. I personally don't like Charles Sims that much, but he's valuable to the coaching staff, he's valuable to the GM, and he'll probably make the team. And then the final guy I want to talk about is Brad Seaton, the right tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Brad Seaton's actually sneakily had one of the better off seasons up to this point in training camps. He's looked good in one-on-ones. He's just looked good in game time, and he's looked good with what he's been able to do with the team. So he's facing another little bit of a battle. He's playing against Cole Gardner, Mike Lidke, Leonard Wester for these backup tackle spots. Now I know some of them, for me, these whether or not you're going to play left tackle, whether or not you're going to play right tackle, that's kind of fluid because all the Buccaneers' backup offensive linemen seem to have been moving around a lot lately. So I think it's a very fluid situation where Seaton could end up being the backup left tackle, or he could end up being the backup right tackle. I think he's going to end up being the backup right tackle, if only because he's shown the most at training camp. However, you can't really count out guys like Cole Gardner, like Mike Lidke. I think Mike Lidke's been on the team for a couple of years at this point. He's on and off, obviously, but still. So Seaton has been facing a little bit of an uphill battle versus veterans and versus other fellow younger type of tackles and whatnot. And Leonard Wester, too, has a lot of momentum going for you. So you assume it's Lidke, it's Seaton, and it's Cole Gardner fighting for one tackle spot. That's a lot of competition to have, including some other guys that the Buccaneers have just signed. So it would be tough. I can see how it could be tough for Seaton to make this roster, but I really do think he will. I think he's shown a lot in training camp. He's shown a lot for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And yeah, so all in all, just a little bit of review. I think Stevie T, Charles Sims, and Brad Seaton are going to make this roster just because of the staff likes them, and for the case of Stevie T and Charles Sims, they're former draft picks, and they do have some stuff to offer. Stevie T is a big run stuffer and a guy who can create opportunities for the pass rushers. And then for Charles Sims, just as a pure receiving back, he's the best we have right now, and I think that the coaching staff values both of those guys. And as Brad Seaton, for Brad Seaton's case, I think that he's really come out and shown that he's been able to come out here and have one of the better training camps for a backup offensive lineman, which I think will earn him a roster spot. And then for the case of Riley Bullough and Freddie Martino, I don't think they're going to be making this roster solely because wide receiver and linebacker are our two deepest positions, I believe. So it's just tough for them. I think, honestly, if the depth wasn't as good, I think that they would make this team for sure. If certain players just weren't on this team, I think they'd make this roster, but I think they get pushed out just because there's just not enough room to keep. So I think they're wonderful, and I think in other circumstances they'd make this team, but I think that our depth's just too good, and they just get pushed out due to the fact that there's just not enough room. I'm sure if they would keep them if they could, but it's just not enough room. So yeah, let me know what you think about all this down in the comment section below, guys. Who are some players who are on your roster bubbles, and why do you think they will or will not make the team? Let me know all that down in the comment section below. I did just launch a Patreon, so if you want to check that out, that'll be down in the description below as well. Again, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in a channel update video that's coming out in a couple of hours, possibly. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now, guys, and as always, see ya, and go Bucs.